We'll get started. Okay, good morning. It's 9 o'clock, October the 22nd, and we will convene with the work session of the Tennessee Textbook Instructional Materials Commission, Quality Commission. I'm Neil Durbin from Dyersburg, Tennessee, the Director of Schools, and we'll just go around the table. Some of you, most of you have been here numerous times, some of you haven't. So, Mr. Cagle, quick introductions.
My name is Frank Cagle. I'm from East Tennessee.
Michelle Bowman, I'm a librarian in Sevier County.
Lisa Coons, Assistant Commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Education.
Joanna Collins, attorney for the Department of Education. I'm here to help.
Pam Kimbrough, recording secretary for Textbook Commission.
Marcy Rudd from Jackson, Tennessee.
Karen Clark from Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Greg Clark, high school principal in Sevier County.
And we thank you all for your time and your effort in coming here and taking your time out of your week to be here to help with the Textbook Commission. Just a few remarks just to kind of focus everybody back where we are on this. The Tennessee legislature has established very high standards and instructional shifts in recent memory here for education throughout Tennessee, but especially in ELA adoption, which is what we're working on now. The Quality Commission is in place to review the process of this. We are not the experts of this material, and we're certainly not I'm not an expert in ELA materials, but we're here as far as to oversee the process and to make any decisions that deal with that process. In the review process, we selected statewide the most knowledgeable literacy experts that we have in public education. And I personally want to show a great deal of appreciation for the work and the expertise that these people have brought to the process. Some of us have been more involved than others in this, and we know that those people really have a passion for what they do and a great deal of knowledge in what they bring to the table for us. They've worked diligently to fulfill the legislative intent. And now it's really important for us to move forward and to keep the schedule, because as a director of schools, we're working with budgets that are long-term budgets over multiple years, and to go forward and complete this adoption process as scheduled. In education, we know two things. We know that the teacher is the most important factor in education, and we know that quality materials are the second most important factor. The General Assembly established this commission to oversee that, as I said, and not to comment on their intent, which was the best materials that we could get. I feel that there's a really good possibility that there is some great material out there of very high quality. I know that for a fact, that may not meet all of the requirements of the legislative intent. Therefore, the waiver process has been established where an LEA holds the ability to show how they plan to use the materials and to fill in any of the gaps that may be in there that are not fulfilling the true rubric as we go through that. So there's the ability to fill the voids, get a waiver, and to have other things adopted. Our ultimate goal, to sum this up, is to get the best quality materials and, of course, to get those in the hands of the best quality teachers that we can get so that we can continue to advance the education in Tennessee. So, here we go. We're moving forward to item 2 in the workshop. The agenda, we have the agenda items on the second page of yours. You've got an agenda there. Does anybody have any questions about the agenda? We have had a request that after the public comment that we take a break so that you'll have an opportunity at your own pace to look back over materials that you have in your notebook and to have those in reflection to what the comments were in the public comment section. Okay, so that we may take an extra break in there. Okay. Any other comments on the agenda? Okay. The minutes, you have the minutes before you there. yes, under tab 1. I'm sorry. Okay, and you might have had a chance to review those minutes. Hopefully you have. Okay, so Dr. Coons, if you will talk about the re-review process for us, please.
Certainly. We began the textbook adoption process over 12 to 18 months ago. The original review process reviewed all materials for ELA and CTE that were bid. 5 reviewers reviewed each material by grade level with a grade level scoring instrument, and an average of those 5 reviewers passed or failed those materials. The scoring instrument that was used focused on the instructional shifts that Mr. Durbin referenced in his opening remarks that are the significant changes to the ELA curriculum and expectations that the legislature approved. The second section reviewed each individual standard, the Tennessee Academic Content Standards for ELA, and reviewed those standards if it was a CTE material. Next, the third section of the scoring instrument talked about the critical material components for the teacher to deliver instruction effectively and make sure those instructional shifts were in place. In the K2 and 3-5 materials, there was a foundational section, and finally, for information only about the teacher features in the materials. So during the original review, all 5 sections were scored. If materials passed or failed during the original review, publishers were notified in early July of that status. At that point in time, publishers had the opportunity to review the comments from the original set of 5 reviewers and make changes to that set of materials and resubmit. The original resubmit day was August 16th, so that publishers had approximately 5 weeks to make those reviews. Because of the pause, which you voted on September 20th, publishers actually submitted all of their materials for re-review on September 27th. In addition, publishers had the opportunity to provide guidance for the review committee around how to navigate their materials and how to find different components to make sure that the reviewers could find the different pieces in the materials. As we have gone through textbook adoptions, and the publishers are definitely experts on this, there have been changes in the way materials are published and procured and put together, so that we need to make sure that the reviewers knew how to use the materials and how to find things, so the publishers were able to give guidance on where to find different components of their resources in their suite of materials. The review occurred on September 28th and 29th, and thank you, Mr. Durbin, for attending. We appreciated your presence and comments and conversations with the reviewers. We appreciated your oversight during that time. We had 2 reviewers review every single material that was resubmitted. So anything that failed during the first review was resubmitted and reviewed on the 28th and 29th by 2 reviewers. As you recall, on September 20th, an additional review qualification happened for our reviewers. They went through an additional scoring task, and the top 26 reviewers were selected for that 28th and 29th review process, and they were normed on that task before they were selected to make sure we had the very best of the best review the materials on the 28th and 29th. They completed their review of all materials on the 28th and 29th, and of the 70 materials that were re-reviewed, 72% of those materials passed on that status. Publishers were notified the following week of their re-review status, and reviewers left you detailed comments as well as the notification for publishers. So publishers received each of those pass-fail documents that you have in your notebook on the week of the 30th, September 30th, so no later than October 4th. They also received those materials. You also have a summary sheet in your notebook for each publisher that still had failing materials that provides you a high level of the trends across materials for those 4 components. So in your summary sheet in your notebook, you have high-level trends around instructional shifts, around standards, around critical material components, foundational skills. Teacher features are not included in your notebook because that was for your information only and was not part of the re-review process. So the re-reviewers left you comments on any material that still failed after the re-review process, and then you also have a trend document within your notebook to provide you the feedback from the expert team that you requested to re-review these materials over the 28th and 29th. I do also want to highlight the waiver process that Mr. Durbin mentioned. Districts have started the process and are in process. We have not had any districts submit a waiver, but districts have the opportunity to look at materials across the board, regardless of this list, and determine what best meets their needs. So if there is a material that may have failed because of a gap in standards, they can supplement that gap on a local process and submit a waiver to the commissioner and request to use materials. So there is still a waiver process which allows local districts to ultimately make the decision about what materials best fit the needs of their students.
Okay, so not to be too redundant here, we had 5 reviewers that reviewed all the materials, right? In the initial review.
Yes, sir.
And then we had 2 reviewers for the re-review.
Correct.
For each one that did not pass, okay?
For a total of
And-
7 unique reviews.
And the only, the re-reviewers would not have been the initial reviewers as well, right?
Correct.
So these are 7 individual reviewers who did this. Okay, the only materials that were re-reviewed were materials that did not pass under the initial review,
Correct.
okay? And of those, you said 72% in the re-review,
Passed.
they did eventually pass.
Correct.
Okay, and the best of the best were the people who were doing the re-review, and they were retrained and renormed,
Correct.
and a few of the processes were slightly, that is a smaller group, and so
Correct.
obviously the logistics changed slightly on that.
We did have 3 materials where the 2 reviewers disagreed. And in those situations, Mr. Cagle asked about what our process was going to be on the September 20th. So in the event we had 3 materials where the reviewers disagreed, we had a 3rd reviewer from that team of 26 review that material independently.
So we could have had as many as 8 different people
Correct.
review, right? Okay. Okay, so the process, obviously, you know, if Karen, I know you've seen the process, you know what it entails. The tool that, you know, that was established, that the legislature more or less mandated us to use, is a laborious tool. Okay, it's a long tool. And we're looking at that, and we'll look at that as a commission, you know, as far as amending that. But we weren't able to change that in the middle of the stream. We can't, you know, we couldn't just go through the process and change the rules at halftime. So, you know, it is what it is, and we were working through that, and hence the waiver process and the flexibility in the waiver process. Okay, the ultimate decision still goes to the LEAs as we finalize this, because they will have the option of choosing whichever materials they want in the adoption process that they go through. Correct?
As long as their waiver is approved by the commissioner.
Yes. Got that. Okay. All right, Ms. Collins.
Okay, so publisher presentation guidance. So textbook commission policy 2.100 states, on or before the date that the textbook commission meets to vote on the list of textbooks to recommend to the State Board of Education for approval, the commission may give publishers an opportunity to respond to the findings of the state advisory panels for an allotted time not to exceed 15 minutes for each publisher, and each publisher may have 1 spokesperson unless expressly permitted by the chairman. And I understand from the chairman that each publisher will have the full 15 minutes to give their presentation, and then the commission members will have an opportunity to ask any questions at that time. So we have received 2 requests to present, and so those are on the agenda. And I don't believe that we have any additional public comments that we've received, but let us know if that's incorrect. Okay, great.
Okay, and just like always, and y'all have been through this a bunch, and I know you know this, so when you come up to present, we just ask that you, for the record, that you state your name, who you represent, Okay, and then when you finish your presentation, if you'll tell us, so that then we'll, Commission, if you would kind of jot down questions, if you had questions as they present, to give them their full uninterrupted 15 minutes, and then the questions will be outside of that 15 minutes, because we want to give them full time if they desire to have that full time in that 15 minutes. Okay?
And I believe we're going alphabetically, so Hope Mifflin, Harcourt will go first, and then Scholastic, correct? Is that correct?
That will work for me, yes. Okay. I didn't know if you meant alphabetically by the presenter or by the company. Okay, we can take care of that. Okay. So if there's no other business in the workshop, we'll move to the meeting. Yes, Karen. Sure.
The waiver process that was described, I think it was about in the September 4th documents, and it was described the waiver process that would take place, and that was information being shared. Is that the same waiver process, or is it?
So districts have the opportunity under statute for unique and individual circumstances. For example, they have a material that may have not made the list that they feel is high quality that they would like to use, and then they could supplement the standards based on the review that did not meet expectations, and they can fill out a waiver process. That waiver process is live. It is on the Tennessee Department of Education textbook page. Districts have received 3 different opportunities for webinars, and they will also receive an opportunity at the league conference for support, and then we'll have regional workshops also to support districts. So if they are in that situation, they can apply for a type 1 or a type 2 waiver and explain how they would meet those standards that our expert team said that the materials did not meet. So they could definitely go ahead and move forward with that waiver process. It closes January 15th, so they have several months to make informed decisions on the waiver.
I just didn't know if anything about that waiver had changed from that document. Okay.
No, but I think it would be important, Ms. Clark, for Dr. Coons to explain, because you just brought it up, the type 1 and the type 2 waiver, just for the record.
Sure.
So we have that.
The type 2-1 waiver are materials that might be open education resource that have been represented from a publisher. For example, on your bid list, Amplify has core knowledge language arts. There's also an open education resource. A district could take something that is a version of something that has been published and is open education resource and apply for a type 1 waiver, or they could apply for something different on a type 2 waiver. So a type 2 waiver would not have necessarily an approved version on the adoption list. It might be a district created material. It might be a new open education resource. It might be something that is not on the adoption list that they want to provide supplements for in their own district kind of merging process. So the type 2 waiver truly provides a district the opportunity to take different resources and put them together in a way that meets the district needs.
Thank you.
And we do have numerous districts throughout the state that do that type 2 resource. I don't want to call any names, but I mean, they're there. It's public knowledge. Yep. Mr. Clark?
There has always been a waiver process in statute. I would have to refer to Joanna about when that waiver process has been approved in statute, but I think it's 10, 15 years. I think the ability to meet districts' unique and individual needs has changed over the past several years in the state, and as the publishing market changes and as districts have fiscal needs and different fiscal resources, I think we've had an expansion of districts who have actually applied for waivers in the past several years.
And I think the use of technology has also accelerated that as well. Yes, Ms. Bowman.
Has Hope Mifflin's acquisition of Cengage had any effect on how they're going to be on the list?
That would be out of my area of expertise. I don't know.
That has not changed on the bid list with the ISBNs.
Any other questions before we move to the meeting? Great. Then we'll call this meeting to order. I'm Neil Durbin, the chairman, and we'll open this meeting of the Textbook Instructional Materials Quality Commission. October the 22nd, 2019. Ms. Kimbrough will have a roll call for us, please.
Neil Durbin,
Here.
Michelle Bowman. Here. Lisa Coons,
Here.
Frank Cagle,
Here.
Greg Clark. Here. Karen Clark,
Here.
Dean Mills, Marcy Rudd.
Here.
Chairman, you have a forum.
Thank you. And just to mix things up, Greg, we'll start over here for introductions. It's amazing how quickly these go now. You know, at first everybody had to say to me, okay, go ahead.
I'm Greg Clark, and I'm a principal in high school in Sevier County.
Karen Clark. I'm a reading specialist in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Marcy Rudd. I'm from Jackson, Tennessee.
Pam Kimbrough, Recording Secretary.
Neil Durbin, Director of Schools in Dyersburg, Tennessee.
Joanna Collins, attorney for Department of Education.
Lisa Coons, Assistant Commissioner for Standards and Materials for the Tennessee Department of Education.
Michelle Bowman, I'm a librarian in Sevier County Schools.
I'm Frank Cagle. I'm a retired newspaperman. I'm from Strawberry Plains, Tennessee.
Okay, we'll move to our consent items. You've had an opportunity to look over the meeting agenda. I'll take a motion to adopt the meeting agenda. Ms. Bowman, motion. Second. Mr. Clark. All in favor, voice vote. Say aye. Opposed? Okay, the approval of the minutes that are on tab 1. We'll take a motion for approval of the minutes. Motion, Mr. Cagle. Second, Ms. Bowman. All in favor, voice vote. All opposed. Okay, we'll pass. And then we'll have the acknowledgement of the bid list, and the bid list is behind tab 2. The bid list was everything that was proposed to us, to the state board and approved by the state board correctly. Yes, okay. Again, we'll take a voice vote on this. Take a motion. Motion, Ms. Bowman. Second. Mr. Clark. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. All right, so we'll move to the publisher's presentations. Okay, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. Dun, dun. Okay, I assume Ms. Harris? Ms. Harris. Again, we'll ask you to state your name, who you represent, and we'll start the clock as soon as you get comfortable and begin. You have pushed the button and your microphone is on, I assume. If it's red, you're on. You're hot.
Okay, there we go.
There we go. That's good.
We have some handouts here we'd like to share with you. I'm sorry?
Handouts. Are you a teacher? I just...
Handouts are always good. Good? Okay. Does everyone have a handout? Okay, great. Good. Good morning. My name's Jennifer Harris. I'm here on behalf of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. I'm the Vice President of Learning Architecture for K-6 Reading. My team is the team who created the Into Reading program for Tennessee. And we would like to just talk through the 2 points in grade 3 that were failed in the re-review process, and kind of talk through some evidence supporting that those criteria have been met. So I'll kind of just walk you through each slide since we don't have anything to show on a screen. That might be the easiest. So going to the first slide that says initial review results on page 2. So basically all of our grade levels passed the initial review except grades 2 and 3. And both of those grades passed 3 out of the 4 sections. So that was the overall result after the first initial review. We submitted material as part of the re-review process. And in that process, grade 2 did pass. And those same criteria, though, were failed in grade 3. However, the instructional approach and the pedagogy is identical from grade 2 to grade 3. So we just wanted to walk through these criteria specifically and places in which we have met those criteria and have you consider those points, please. So following the review results, you'll see a slide that says 12 grade levels approved. So again, all of the grade levels that we submitted, we also submitted, although I'm in charge of the K-6 program, we submitted literature as well for the middle school and upper grades. So all of those passed. So we had this one sliver of grade 3 that we're talking about today. So going to the next slide, please, you can see our grounds for the appeal. So I'd like to outline the grounds that we want to talk about today in terms of the appeal. We'll hope you'll consider the evidence that I'll show you shortly. And the into reading, the pedagogy, the instructional design, and the method of delivery across 3 through 5 are really identical, and 4 through 5 pass that same criteria. And so we hope that you can see that grade 3 follows that same approach, and it follows that, hopefully, that would pass as well. So the next slide, the red slide that says a closer look at Tennessee Indicator Section 1B. This is regarding vocabulary, and I'd just like to illustrate how the program does indeed provide direct and contextual instruction for Tier 2 and 3 vocabulary that supports knowledge building. So a little closer look at that. On the next slide, we outline the instructional approach for teaching critical vocabulary, and this is true across K-5. So the re-reviewer's concerns centered around the absence of a vocabulary routine and a lack of explicit teacher instruction in vocabulary. So I'd like to address those directly. Interreading's vocabulary approach is explicit and systematic. The approach, which is identical across all grades again, includes an introduction to the words, guided practice and application, review and reinforcement, and a spiral review. So you can, going to the next slide, you'll see the vocabulary routine cited at a unit level and at a lesson level at point of use. And here, the critical vocabulary from each student book selection that kids read is introduced through the use of the vocabulary routine. The basic routine appears with every introduction of the words, as shown here. This is a powerful routine and consistent in all grades. We understand that there's a lot of material to review when an ELA program is getting reviewed, so we feel that perhaps it just wasn't seen, or the re-reviewers might not have seen it, so that's why we just appreciate the opportunity to point it out. The next slide, you'll see the little vocabulary card that says democracy on it. So after teachers have introduced the critical vocabulary words for a section, they guide the students' practice. Then the students use these vocabulary cards for targeted application. Each card includes the word's definition, a context sentence, and along with collaborative discussion questions. So this helps students directly apply the knowledge they've just learned about the critical vocabulary words. And these reviewers may not have had access to these. You would have had to look for them online, so we're not sure if perhaps these were missed, but this is a kind of a critical component to the vocabulary instruction. And following the direct application, there's review and reinforcement with guided practice and application at the lesson level. So the words are reviewed and reinforced in a subsequent lesson. Students also complete an activity with the words in a know it, show it component, which is a workbook in which kids can apply what they've learned. And then there's also spiral review. On the next page, you'll see an example of that. So the spiral review reviews not only the current vocabulary words, but also the previously taught words. So in summary, that is the conclusion of where we feel that vocabulary, that indicator has been met. And so we hope that you can see that it does align with indicator 1B. And so from there, I'm going to move on to section 1C. On the green page, you'll see. So this indicator has to do with end-of-unit culminating tasks. And we're going to illustrate how the program materials provide students with multiple opportunities to demonstrate their literacy skills and convey knowledge acquisition. So the primary ways, going to the next slide, that we demonstrate knowledge through culminating task is with the module wrap-up and culminating tasks. So these are the primary ways in which the students demonstrate their knowledge. So the next slide we get into, you'll see it's titled Module Wrap-Up. The re-reviewers expressed a concern that modules were missing a unifying task to allow the learner to convey the knowledge acquired within the module. The module wrap-up is one such opportunity. It appears at the end of each 3-week module and provides an opportunity for students to synthesize topic knowledge gained through the texts and activities across the module. Students complete a knowledge map and a vocabulary network that they had begun at the start of the module and make connections among all the texts they've read in that module. The next slide talks about culminating task enhancement. So in the original review, the reviewers suggested we make a stronger connection between the culminating tasks and the knowledge acquired throughout the rest of the module. As a result, we made enhancements to all of the culminating tasks to make these connections clearer and stronger. We also included additional instructional support. The re-reviewer comments centered around module projects, and module projects are actually not intended to be culminating tasks. So the other 2 items that I just mentioned are the things that are the culminating tasks. So module projects are really intended to be culminations of everything learned to date in the program that enables kids to express communication skills, presentation skills, everything like up to date. So it wasn't intended really to be a module level culminating task. So I just wanted to make that distinction clear. So based on what I just outlined, we do believe that 1C is met through the language of the indicator, because the culminating tasks and the module wrap-up, again, are the robust opportunities that students have to demonstrate literacy skills and knowledge they've acquired in a module. Moving again, I'm just concluding with the grounds for appeal again. Given the points I've outlined here and the accompanying evidence, I hope I made it clear that the program does meet criteria 1B and C. And again, the Inter-Reading Tennessee pedagogy, the instructional methods, the design, they're identical across grades 3 through 5. So we hope that grade 3 can join grade 4 and 5 in being adopted. And finally, I'm just closing again with the 12 levels that were 12 grade levels that were approved. You know, our goal is like yours, to provide the best instructional materials for teachers and kids, and we believe that this program that was created especially for Tennessee based on your standards and your criteria meet those needs of both teachers and kids. So we're really, we hope that grade 3 can join the other grade levels in being adopted by the state. Thank you very much for your consideration. Can I answer any questions?
Yes, first of all, thank you for coming and explaining it to us. I think that especially in 1B, the obvious issue that the reviewers and the re-reviewers may have had, even you admitted, that they might not have had access to the critical components that were involved in that. And they obviously didn't, or they would have recognized that. So why, I mean, can you tell me why they didn't have access to that?
We did provide logins to the digital logins to the platform, and then they had the printed materials as well. I think there's just so much to review that it's quite possible they just didn't get to the components, you know, as we would have hoped. So that's really all I can say. I think it was certainly, I'm sure they tried, you know, to cover everything they could, but it might just not have been as visible enough as maybe.
Okay, and I was actually there at the review.
Okay.
Okay, and I didn't have a clue who they were reviewing, and it
Right.
may have been this, it may not have been this.
Sure.
Perhaps Lisa can express this, but I do know that we have multiple people trying to work on that at the department on the 11th floor, where we should have had great connectivity, relatively intelligent people, especially Charles.
This
right?
group did have technology access and did review the technology materials in this product.
Okay, and I know that a lot of times that we recognize that everybody's not overly tech savvy, but you know what? Most of our teachers are older than 25 and may have some challenges with technology. Not to mention any names, but some people up here had trouble logging in this morning just here at Cordell Hall.
Sure.
So, that's a part of everything. And,
Right.
And we've talked about this in our process about having the possibility of having more tech support for the people when they come here. But I think that's something the publishers need to understand as well. Our
Right.
people that did this they're the best we've got.
Yes.
Okay. And they're pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And if they can't do it, then the chances of a mere mortal sitting out, in a rural district or an urban district of having greater success are not very good.
Understood. Yeah, and we are actually really actively trying to every day better our platform in terms of discoverability of things, because there is so much in terms of especially this program and ELA in general. There's so much that goes into a reading program. So we're working on that daily, to make things more discoverable. So it could have been at the time of the review, these things just weren't as visible as we would have hoped.
Yes, I'm sorry, and as we are in an official meeting, so please recognize yourself as you begin. Ms. Clark?
Karen Clark. I have a question. Should I direct it to?
Yes, please, directly to her.
Did the reviewers have the materials themselves, like the vocabulary cards and that, like the actual materials?
We don't think, I'm going to ask one of my colleagues if that's okay. Is that okay if I?
Yes, ma'am, you may.
Did they have the physical cards? Yeah.
We did not have the physical cards in print. We did provide a large number of print materials, and then we provided digital access for the others, since there are just so many resources.
I do think, though, that would be helpful, that when people are reviewing, that they have all the materials that a teacher would have to use, to actually utilize and work through, and some of this might have been avoided.
I think you're right. I think having the physical cards would have been an asset in this case, and they would have had to find them digitally, which I think would have been challenging.
Because I've seen them, and I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Dr. Coons?
Yes, so I just want to verify on the second or third slide, you said you did not pass section 1, the alignment to the shifts, that component of the rubric, correct?
Right, it was section 1,
Right.
criteria B and C.
And so the designers of the rubric was, prior to my tenure at the department, required that section be passed at 100%, because that aligns to the critical shifts that you spoke about earlier that the legislature made in the standards. And it did focus around vocabulary and alignment to the knowledge building were the two
Correct.
indicators that you did not receive passing marks on. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And then in your presentation, you talked about vocabulary. What I see in the comments is connecting to text. Do you have, I know this is your presentation, but for the committee and for their review of your appeal, I see that you have a slide about democracy, and it talks about ideas about democracy, country democracy, a school run by democracy, but I don't see examples that address specifically the comments from the reviewers about connected to text. Do we have anything like that for the commission to review that specifically addresses that connected to text concern from the reviewers?
So the vocabulary cards, one example of those are derived right from, the words are derived right from the text and the selections the kids are reading. So this particular selection is all about democracy, and that whole module relates to being a good citizen, democracy, that's the theme. So while I don't have the selections handy, although I don't know if we have any print things handy.
So I
Just
guess,
the
Jennifer, my
vocabulary. Yes.
specific question is, the comments from the reviewers in your report said that their largest concern was the direct connection from vocabulary to context. Does your presentation provide us any examples that reflect that concern of the reviewers?
I think that what I read as their explicit comments, I have their, so From the re-reviewers' comments, the comments were the vocabulary routine could not be located and the routine could not be located and references in the document did not lead to explicit vocabulary instruction. So in the initial, we did submit for the re-review materials to address the very concern you just outlined. That was the original initial review's concern. So upon re-review, we actually added instruction to make those connections. I did not show those here since those did not reappear in the re-reviewer comments.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, so I believe based on the fact that the re-reviewers did not cite that issue again, I believe they must have thought that what we created as part of the re-review met that criteria or met that, that criticism.
Well, I see the comment again when they have the comments about the end of unit tasks. They talk about the module project did not connect to the text. They talked about culminating tasks, conveying knowledge. And then when I look at your culminating task example, these aren't paginated, so I have a hard time referring for the committee, but the slide deck that says culminating task enhancements, it says what makes the character interesting, and imagine your class is creating a book that tells something interesting about each of you. I don't see your example building knowledge or conveying knowledge through text. I see it talking about their own personal knowledge.
So I think we don't have the instructional context here, but in fact, in the teacher's instruction, which we did edit as well, and submitted as part of the re-review.
But it's not in the slide, correct?
It's not in this slide.
Okay.
That's fair.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Cagle.
You quite rightly point out all these other grade levels and all this other material that passed. These reviewers evidently didn't have any problem with a great deal of your material. But this one particular section flunked twice. So it's not. It seems to me that if these people are doing a good job of analyzing all these other grades and all these other there's all this other material, and they have a problem here, then that's a red flag to me.
I think that the issues from the re-review seemed different than the issues from the initial review. So the re-review focused more on the absence of, in case 1B, the absence of a vocabulary routine, which I think I've cited here. And in the case of the culminating task, the re-reviewers focused on module projects, which were not intended to be culminating tasks. So I understand your point's well taken, but what I'm just trying to declare is that the arguments of the initial reviewers and the re-reviewers, I think, differ. And I think we refuted both the initial review comments and the re-reviewer comments as not, in terms of the wording of the indicator and the criteria, I believe firmly that we've met those.
But in the initial review, there was material obviously that they didn't have or didn't realize. Now, I'm not clear from this discussion on the re-review. Did they have those vocabulary?
They would have had no. They would not have received the vocabulary cards. No, because the initial review.
So what were they re-reviewing?
The initial review of the vocabulary was looking for an explicit connection between the selections and the words themselves, which we did submit instruction to account for that. The re-reviewer's comment was different and was getting at the routine and understanding how instruction was explicitly taught through the routine, which involves the cards. So it was a slightly different argument or problem, I think, with the vocabulary. And they did not have the cards to sort of be able to answer that without going through this process.
But in reference to the exact same element both times.
Yes, but again, I think different points of contention.
Okay.
Jennifer, I didn't review your online materials at all that you submitted. Did those have access of sample digital vocabulary cards to show?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
in the digital resources, and I do know that they had they had connectivity issues, so we were helping them log on. So
Okay.
I know they did log on.
Sure.
So I do have personal remembrance of them logging on, but they had access on a digital. Your digital suite has access, as other publishers
Yes.
do, to all those resources.
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why we didn't initially submit them physically, because there's so much the material that.
20 boxes, just so
20
everybody, like,
yes.
it's 20 boxes per grade level now.
Yes.
That the amount of materials that publishers provide are quite extensive.
Yeah.
So it could be 20 boxes for a grade level worth
Yeah,
of
so
materials.
anything that's sort of like an instructional card like that, we hoped that through the digital platform is where people would access and review those materials. So again, I think, that may have been troublesome in some cases here.
And this is really Mickey Mouse, but old people can't read this. Okay, I'm sorry.
Noted.
That's some pretty small print on
Yes.
your examples from that. So,
Okay, I apologize.
well, I'm sorry for being old. So, yeah. Yes.
Would it be appropriate for us during our break to be able to review some of those digital materials before we vote on it?
We are reviewing the process. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't feel that that's our place to review the actual materials. We review the process.
Okay, just making sure.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Harris, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And again, I look at this, as you've mentioned as well, as a learning process for everybody, and we just hope that we have the best materials. Okay, Miss Lisa Thomas, is that correct? Don't worry, we won't start the clock until y'all get set up. I can tell you've got a lot of stuff here, okay? So,
Start the others around.
Okay. Okay, sounds great.
they come from both sides there.
As I'll ever be. Here we go. All right, well, good morning.
Okay, I'm sorry. Hang on just one second. Let's make sure everybody's ready to go. We're going to.
If you'll pull that out, we're going to be using everything that's in your bag.
Okay.
Thank you.
We don't want to take your time, so why don't you let
Thank you
us
so
kind of get
much.
adjusted here.
We're going to be referring to these two documents.
Great.
And then there are also some books that are for your reference as well.
I can do this without the book if you want me to.
You want to do a read aloud?
Done it before. Hang on. My grandkids are going to love this. Okay, Ms. Thomas, if you will recognize yourself, Ms. Robbie will start the clock and we will begin.
All right, well, good morning. My name is Lisa Thomas. I'm our Vice President of Adoptions and Customization at Scholastic Education. And we are definitely glad to be here. We welcome the opportunity to present some of our suggestions that we made back during the review process and the re-review process. And so we wanted to take the opportunity to address really some big areas of concern that were addressed in K4. Our program was confirmed at grades 5-6, and I will walk you through how our pedagogy and instructional routines are the same K6, and also be able to point to you some of those higher level categories and some of our examples that we provided during the review process as well. One of the things we wanted to start with is, we definitely have a very non-traditional program, and that our program is based on whole, small, and independent instruction. And so one of the key things, and we brought our reviewers box, we thought that would be important as a starting point, because one of the things that we provided in the front is what we refer to as our placemat. And in your flip chart, you're actually going to have that document organized just a little bit differently. So if you want to flip that over, you're going to see where it says blended program components. And we put the review comment at the very top in this particular example, that it said that they could not pass a particular standard because it seemed that the books were optional and maybe not included. So one of the things that we did both through our video process and through our materials is we did indicate that every resource that we talk about that's in print, a teacher does receive copies of. And so one thing, of course, that didn't happen in the review process is, you can imagine, just our level book room alone has 7,000 books. So when you start to think about those resources, obviously were not provided for all whole, small, and independent as a part of the review process. So we may not have done a great job of actually explaining the fact that a teacher does receive all of those materials. So we definitely want to pose that to the committee. To the commission. We also want to pose that we were also dinged a little bit around the use of authentic text. And so that's why we've put those books in your bag. What we wanted you to see is that Scholastic, out of all of the programs that were submitted, provide the largest number of authentic text. We are the world's largest publisher of children's literature. And so one of the things that we kind of included in your PowerPoint deck that you'll see is Scholastic is built on 100 years of literacy. And so we've taken that to build this blended model of whole, small, and independent instruction. So in your booklet that's bound in this direction with the 2 tabs, you guys have some PowerPoint slides. I'll try to stick to them, but know that I may go off of it just a little bit. But you'll see our design of our whole, small, and independent classroom. And so if you flip the page, what I want to do is just walk you through those components briefly so that you can see the vast array of resources that a classroom teacher would have. And this will also point to some of our vocabulary and word work that we're going to indicate, because different routines are found in different resources for the classroom teacher. So you're going to find that we provide an implementation guide at each grade level. We also provide a getting started, which is the first 3 weeks of instruction. We also provide 6 teacher guides at each unit. But all of those resources are housed in what we call our Teacher Digital Hub. So all resources that a teacher would indicate or need to use in the classroom are also housed here. So again, depending on accessibility to that Teacher Hub, could have prevented some of the review of those resources as well. We also include flip charts and posters. Again, examples of all of those were provided in the box, but again, they didn't get to see every single copy of every single one, okay? Then if you flip to the next page where it says small group components, this is based on our leveled book room. This is where the teachers go for small group instruction. That is a resource for a building. There are also additional resources that I'll mention that go along with that. And then
Sorry,
you also...
can you show us which page?
Oh, sure. It's going to be this page right here.
We're on the same page
Yes.
with you. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know I'm going fast and furious.
Yes, ma'am.
So the small group pieces are there. Then if you flip to the next page, those are going to have your independent learning components. A huge part of our independent learning, which also helps to address both the phonics and word knowledge and inventory standards, are housed in our programs first and Word. Both of those are digital programs, and again, depending on the access that reviewers may have had, depends on how deep they got into those particular products, and I'll demonstrate a few pieces around that. And then we also include a 50-book library based on the 7 strengths, all authentic text. So that's where a lot of that authentic text piece comes into play. So you'll see kind of our key statements we wanted to focus on today were around authentic text and how we address text complexity, which I'll do with you in just a moment, how we address differentiated instruction, and our vocabulary and word work. So those are going to be our 3 key areas of focus in the next few minutes. I'm going to start with text complexity. So if you keep flipping in the same resource that you're in, you're going to see a chart that looks like this. These are our 6 content area themes. We actually built the program with a backwards mind design. In other words, we spiraled the curriculum and the standards to match this curriculum map. There is a blend of fiction and nonfiction. We also build in text complexity as we go across that grade level and from grade level to grade level. So now what I want to do is I want to draw you back to what's more like a flip chart. because we did that vertically. You're going to see this document now. And over the next few pages in here, I'm just going to point out to you what we use to determine our text complexity. One of the key issues is that we use not just Lexile levels, but we also use guided reading levels, and we also take into account task and reader, which is exactly how the text complexity triangle was designed. So what you'll find over the next few examples, we're going to be looking at grade 2. Bless you. We wanted to show you an example from grade 2 of where that text complexity lies in week 19. So you'll see for the interactive read aloud that is used in whole group, it is a 560 Lexile with a guided reading range of level R. Then if you flip, you'll see some examples of how we qualified this as highly complex, which actually was not even a criteria. The highest criteria was moderately complex. We, in the re-review process, renormed it to highly complex. Then you'll notice for our shared and close reading, which will be the page, the year of the book, again, a higher reading level, 560 for the Lexile, guided reading level O. Then if you flip to the small group pages, you'll see the range of the guided reading levels there as well. J through N are what are recommended to go with that week of instruction. However, because the level book room is ranging from levels A through Z, a teacher has access to any level of text that they want to pull and utilize for that instruction. And then just one more example on page 7 in the flip chart is we also have what we call Literacy Pro, which is a digital program built into the program, over 2,300 ebooks. Again, allows the teacher to utilize those in any capacity. It doesn't have to just be used in independent reading. There is also a shared reading library of 250 additional titles. So if a teacher finds that their class is at a higher level, they could certainly pull any of those additional resources, and you can search by skill and strategy for any of those to pull in additional access. That is something I know even when we are out and implementing in schools, teachers don't even realize the robust amount of resources that they have built into the program until they begin to use it. Then you'll see we just documented the process in here as to where the Tennessee text complexity document fell. We also have included in your binder a research article from the Washington Post about why we have to take into account more than just Lexile levels. And then I also want to draw your attention to our Power Standards progression. This is going to show you from grade level to grade level, all the way K through 6. And remember, we passed at grades 5 and 6. This is the same instructional routines that take place each week, where we build that common language, knowledge, and tools around the Tennessee standards. And this is where we ask kids to understand and show what they understand about those particular standards. Some of this is done through guided practice, then other is done independently by those students. And so this is where those standards progress from level to level. And then if you turn to page 12, that's where you'll just see some additional examples of that interactive read aloud and that shared reading opportunity, where again we argue that the level of text complexity is rigorous and meets the demands of Tennessee standards. We also had a comment specifically, if you look at pages 13 and 14, around comparing and contrasting text. Every day 5 in every grade level, that's exactly what we do. We compare and contrast the short and the long text. We also tie it back to the genre study, which is what you're seeing an example of here around informational text over those next 2 pages. So those are our examples around that. And then the other key element was around developing fluency in those grade levels as well, in grades 3 and 4. So you'll see samples of that as well within the flip chart. Then what I'd like to do is I'd like to just give you a quick example. If you go back to your PowerPoint deck, and you're going to see 4 books. And I'd love for you, I know this is taking 30 seconds of my time, but I think it's well worth it. I'd love for you, looking at the titles of these books, to rank these in order of Lexile level, 1 being the easiest and 4 being the hardest. Just quick. There's no money prizes. Got them? These 4, I'm sorry, it doesn't have a page number. It's in the PowerPoint slide deck. Okay.
I was going to say, that's really hard to do without reading a book.
Okay, well, you guys are making my point. My point is, if teachers, yeah. Yeah, well, I'll just give you guys a quick lowdown here. O is for Orca is a 1050 Lexile level. The Sound and the Fury is actually at 800 Lexile level, which falls in 4th and 5th grade. My point is, with text complexity, you can't just judge a book by its cover, right? You actually have to get into the text. Lexiles only take into account the syntactic. It does not take into account the content and the meaning. And that's the point that we just wanted to make for you guys, is that when we talk about text complexity, it's more than just a Lexile level, okay? All right, so the last thing that I want to do with you guys, and I know I've got you flipping all over the place, is we're going to stay in the flip chart, and I just want to give you a second to look at vocabulary and word work in scholastic literacy. We too have a daily vocabulary routine. We're going to be on page 17 in the flip chart. The daily routine is actually housed in the implementation guide, which could have caused an issue for reviewers to find that. That is something we obviously do within our implementation training of scholastic literacy. But you'll find that for every day of instruction, and I know this is hard to see on that far right side, we've circled every day. We're coming back to those same vocabulary words. If we're rereading that text, if it's a new text, we introduce new words, but all the words are connected because remember that graphic I showed you about the content, area of focus? That's our theme and our topics. That's how we've matched all of the content that we're teaching in the program. And so when we build that vocabulary, we also build it through our instructional routines in Word, which is our digital program, Words Open Reading Doors. You're seeing screenshots of that on page 18. Within Word, we actually have students read both fiction and nonfiction passages. We know from the research of Dr. Freddie Hebert, who's one of the authors of our program, that 2,500 word families make up 90% of the English language. That's what Word does. It teaches the kids those 2,500 word families. And so what we wanted you to be able to see that may have been difficult in a review process, depending on how much time teachers and reviewers spent in each of these, is that these programs actually do teach the vocabulary instruction. They are tied thematically to scholastic literacy, which means we are connecting both in a print and a digital format for classroom teachers and for students, who at the end of the day, right, is the most important customer at the end of all of this. The other piece we've highlighted for you, if you keep flipping to pages 22, you'll see we also address foundational skills through our small group instruction. And then on page 23, one of the areas that was addressed that we provided in the re-review process is that we did not follow Marzano's thinking around vocabulary instruction. And so we did provide a chart to show out of those 11 strands how often we meet that through all of the various texts, read aloud, shared reading, and small group instruction. So you'll see that chart. And then last but not least, we also have our unit projects. Our unit projects are housed not only at the end of each unit, but then there are also additional extensions of those projects on the Teacher Hub. So those are also provided in here for you as well, along with our rubrics that we use for understanding each of the unit projects, but also what kids did throughout that unit. So we want to base that foundation and understand how kids are being assessed throughout the process, not just on one individual assessment. So those are all of our key pieces. I know I've gone very fast, but I do want to end with really one of my favorite quotes because I think, you know, we're at a bit of a crossroads, right? And so C.S. Lewis always says you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start from where you are and change the ending. And so we obviously ask for your vote to override and change this to a K-6 approval so that we can have the opportunity to provide a consistent program to all schools K-6. In your binder, you also have a letter from Maryville Schools. They are already in the process of using the program K-3. That letter is provided. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That letter is where, I'm sorry?
In section 2, first part of section 2.
First part is section 2.
Along with some additional resources for your review.
Okay. Possibly a little miscommunication here. I think that was a great job of, I love your product, always have, okay? Our job is not to make higher level decision making on as far as what, you know, the studies show and what Marzano thinks and all of that. Ours is to look at the process, okay? I don't know about the rest of the commission. I won't speak for any of them. For me, I need to know how you address what we said didn't happen on a business card. Does that make sense? I'm sorry. And I know you addressed it, and I did catch some of it, but I felt like I got a lot more information than I needed. I think you did a great job. You know, like I said, you know, if I was looking for something for my daughter to teach her kids, you know, it's great materials, love the materials. That's not our job. Did that make sense? How many standards did you not meet?
Quite a few. That's why we can't sit here in
There was a lot
15
of
minutes
it.
and go one
Okay.
by one. But what we tried to do is highline, because it was around authentic text and text complexity, K4,
Mm-hmm.
the vocabulary word instruction, K4, and then also the third point being the differentiated instruction. So whether I'm talking kindergarten or whether I'm talking fourth grade, that's why we pulled the examples that we did, because our program is the same. The only difference is we focus more on foundational skills in those primary grades, and we move it more into word work in those higher levels. But vocabulary is consistently taught throughout. So that's why we picked kind of our 3 big items to discuss with you guys today and give those examples.
Dr. Kuhn?
If the review committee will turn to the Scholastic binder, I can address your question, Mr. Derman. Scholastic failed approximately 50% of the shifts in education around vocabulary instruction, specifically around opportunities for students to convey knowledge building, and the reviewers commented on the students' use of text evidence. When we look at Tennessee Code Annotated, it requires the materials to conform to standards. Scholastic's materials, according to our expert reviewers, did not meet 30% of the Tennessee standards indicators. So those are the answer to your question.
Okay, so once again, I'm not making any judgment on the materials, the presentation, what the pedagogy that goes with this is at all. Our job is to say that, does this meet the Tennessee standards? Does this meet the process of the legislative intent? Whether we agree with that legislative intent or not, that is our process. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Clark?
Well, can I address one thing real quick?
Absolutely.
So we did provide at every grade level, it was on the flash drive in the reviewer's box. There was a correlation to every grade level and every standard. There was not a single standard as a publisher that we did not cover. Now, I can't determine how your teachers determine that, but I just want to let you know that that is provided. The other key element that we did, and again, we tried to do this through our presentation that was included in the box, but we were told to keep it brief. Every one of these graphic organizers addresses the standards. They spiral from grade level to grade level, and that's how the standards are addressed in this program, then through that end of unit project, and then also through summative assessments. Again, some of those pieces are in print, and some of those are in digital, and sometimes without somebody guiding everyone through all those steps, it's hard to see the connection of all of those, and that's why we feel like obviously we need some work to do on guiding someone through our materials, and we accept responsibility for that as well.
And I agree with especially your last statements, and we agreed in the
Yeah.
previous, with the same thing. Once again, our teachers are, you're obviously so well versed in this. I'm a huge Early Lit fan, especially, and I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate all of the science that goes behind it. If it's not digestible for our average teacher in Giles County or Knox County or Dyersburg City, then we don't meet the legislative intent. Okay, so that's
But the only thing
where our
that I
problem
would
is.
argue, and it's probably not the place to argue with you guys.
That's okay,
But
we
I
can
will
do
say
that.
this because.
All among friends, it's okay,
But
Lisa.
that's what we do in our implementation trainings, right? We don't expect
Mm-hmm.
a teacher to open a box and just know how to use it. That's what we do with our trainings, is to help them understand how do you unpack, how do you teach this, and what does this look like every day in the classroom.
Okay.
So,
Ms. Clark?
One of the issues that came up was vocabulary, and you went back and you did address the Marzano. What page was that on? And
so that's going to be in your flip chart, and that's going to be on page 24. And you guys also received this digitally, so if it's easier to pull it up on your laptops later, you do have this when we provided it. And there's also a short article back in the second binder behind number 2 that's around Freddie Hebert's work and a recent research study that talks about the effect of vocabulary instruction in addressing those 2,500 word families and hitting that 90% of the English language. And that's not a piece that we had available. The research piece was a piece that was published yet and available to the reviewers. So we did add that in that process now so that you guys can see that as well.
Okay, and
I'm sorry.
yes, Dr. Kuhn.
Did you just say you added a piece for today that was not in the process for the reviewers?
I'd have to double check on when this piece was printed, but the Marzano piece in the very back. Around the
So
influence
that
of wood
document was
transfer.
not reviewed during the process. You did not provide that for the reviewers. Is that correct?
Can you find out, Stacy? We'll find out for you.
Okay. Questions of clarity, not that it has anything to do with the rubric at all. You talked about the 7,000 book bank, okay, but you also mix some terms in there, and this is just curiosity. You mix the terms grade level, class, and hub. What's the threshold where you receive the rest of these materials?
Every classroom teacher receives all these materials. The only difference is this resource of 7,000 books
Right.
is actually housed in a resource for the school. So it's not per classroom teacher, it's a school level resource.
So if, I'm sorry, I'm going to use an example. If Dyer County adopted this and they had that, they've got 5 elementary schools and some of them just have 2 classrooms, that each of one of the schools would have that.
Yes, they receive that.
Okay.
It's a K-6 resource.
Lisa, you talked a great deal about vocabulary instruction, and as I look at the reviewer comments in the process, our reviewers spent hours reviewing the materials and those kinds of things. A lot of the comments, as I look through the comments, discuss multiple opportunities for students to convey knowledge building and multiple opportunities for students to use text evidence based in their writing. Did you address those 2 concerns from the expert reviewers in your presentation?
Yeah, so one place where we address the text-based evidence, to me, as the graphic organizers, is the best place to go, because kids have to pull straight from the text to show what they know about that particular standard. And then there are also opportunities, which I don't believe we put in here, but they are in the kit. There are what we call a reader's notebook that kids keep throughout the process, throughout the year, and they're to write about what they read each day. There are also formative assessment pieces on each of the teacher pages. I should say, and I didn't say this earlier, I will say our team in New York, when we built our response back to our re-reviewers, I believe we made a little bit of assumption that we were going back to the same reviewers who had reviewed our materials previously. So our response was more in a dialogue, as if they had picked up from where they had last reviewed. And so we did not address it necessarily from the aspect of starting fresh with someone new. So that's an assumption we made on our part. So do know that there could have been something, because one thing we noticed very clearly is from some of the review to the re-review, some of the comments that weren't made the first time around that were made the second time around, if that makes sense, was because maybe they didn't have the prior knowledge that the first reviewer had, if that makes sense to you guys.
So Lisa, I just want to ask again, their comments were about the majority of writing tasks requiring student to use text evidence in writing, and you just showed a graphic organizer, correct?
Correct.
For that example. Okay, thank you.
But I also have examples I could point to in our teacher's guide where we use our reader's notebook. Again, we didn't want to give you guys 100 pages to review for the process today. I could sit here and do that. If you guys want me to start pulling examples from the text, I certainly can.
Sure. I just wanted to understand, based on the comments that you received back, several of the comments you received back in your reports talked about that. You did not address that specifically in any other space in your presentation other than the graphic organizer,
That is correct.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Did I understand that you were addressing in this some of the information that you received from the original review process?
Yes.
So some of this is response to things
Right, because-
to what we don't have.
Right. And so what happened is things that we were knocked off for in the first process is what we addressed in the re-review. And in the re-review, we were knocked off for things that were okayed in the first process. So there's a little bit of an issue with the comments that were made both directions. That's why we chose to
all
address
dealing-
the most commonly addressed issues.
But all dealing with the same standards?
Not
We
necessarily.
didn't- Okay, I was there. We did not address any standards that passed.
Okay.
I can guarantee that.
Okay. I'm just telling you what we received and what our
Okay.
review process was.
Okay. Any other questions?
And I just want to clarify, you passed 5th and 6th grade on the re-review.
Correct.
kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth failed in the first review for 5 reviewers, and they failed in the second review with an additional 2 reviewers. So you had over 20 reviewers, 25 reviewers review the K4 materials that failed in the first, and then you had an additional 10 expert reviewers review your K4 materials in the second re-review, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, with the lack of public comment, we're going to take just a break here. And in the break, the opportunity is for you to look at the comments that were made in the appeals, to go back into your tabs, and you've got the tabs under behind 3. You've
Lisa.
got both of those on there. Okay, so you can look at those and review that material before we come back together. We'll take a 10-minute break right now. 10:16, so we'll be back, we'll say at 10:25. Okay, are we all back in our places? Okay. We'll call the meeting back to order. All right, so we're taking up the items, and we're going to take these up independently. We're going to take up the item of HMH and their appeal. Okay, the first thing that we need to do is we'll have a motion, and then we'll have discussion, and then we'll take a roll call vote on these. So do I have a motion? Mr. Clark?
Make a motion. What do you want?
To either, to.
That we, okay. I would make a motion that we support the reviewers and staying with what they recommended. Is that the proper
And we're
motion?
doing one at a time. So
Right.
that would be on HMH.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second.
I have a second. Okay. Now, for discussion, do we have discussion?
Mr. Durman, you said the goal of the commission is to oversee the process and determine whether the process was upheld. Is that accurate, or
That-
oversight of the process?
That is the legislative intent of this commission, yes.
Okay. So my concern with the HMH is that the appeals process and the opportunity to appeal did not address the public comments around context and vocabulary and knowledge building focus. So that would be a concern that I would just lay out there, that in the appeal process, some of the comments that were addressed by our expert reviewers were not addressed in the appeal.
Any other comments? Mr.
And
Cagle?
I think there was some question too, whether reviewers initially had all the material they needed, which I don't think is the reviewer's fault. So I support the motion.
Any other comments? Ms. Clark, you look like you want to say something. Microphone.
So in a case where one grade level didn't pass and the rest did, would they all be but third grade available for adoption?
Okay, I'm going to let Ms. Coons, Dr. Coons, address that. I know the answer, but I'll let you address that.
Yes. So the formal adoption list, if this material was not on the formal adoption list for the State Board of Education and the State Board of Education adopted the list, this material would not be included, but the other materials would be, yes.
But they could also apply for the waiver on the other materials under the with the caveat of the knowledge that they know and that the publishers could share with them as far as why it didn't pass, and then they could address that issue in the waiver. Correct?
Yes. The expectation of the waiver is if something failed, say for 1B and 1C, that the district would work in their waiver application to address how they would supplement those materials that were not present for the approval. So that would be an option for districts to do.
Ms. Clark?
But I thought that if I understood that they use the same format for introducing the vocabulary on every grade level. Was it just missed, like it both ways? I see that, what you were saying, so it passed at every grade level but one, but the reviewers were consistent at that grade level. It's almost conflicting. Does that make sense? Like they use the same pedagogy to introduce the vocabulary, but then it did not pass over and over. So that's a tricky.
we have access, but we didn't review those materials, so I can't address that.
Yeah.
All I can address
Yeah.
is that at that
Because
one particular, we had a number of reviewers who did not see that material as passing at that grade level. Now, whether that was an inconsistency on their part, which they scored different things at, at different grade levels, or whether that was just the fact of it, because we did discuss in the discussion, in the review discussion, that there were some other materials out there, they just didn't have them. So it was the process.
In that case, can I make a motion?
You can't make a motion until we vote on the first
Okay.
motion, but we can vote on the first motion and then you can make a motion. Is that correct, Joanna? Okay, do you want to modify Mr. Clark's motion, or is this a different motion? Sorry. Okay. Then we will put the first motion to a vote. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, so the motion, can we repeat the motion, Ms. Pam? I'm sorry, we're going to repeat it from her. Yes.
The motion would be to approve the appeal of HMH.
No, that was not it. Okay, we're going to clarify this. Mr. Clark, we'll repeat that motion one more time. That could be,
The motion was to support the reviewer's decision to leave the third grade off the list.
so to deny the request. Okay, so just to make it critically clear here, if you voted yes, then that would be to deny the request for it to be added to the list. If you voted no, that would be for that motion to fail. Okay? Everybody clear? Okay?
Mr. Durbin,
Yes.
Ms. Bowman,
No.
Dr. Coons. Yes. Mr. Cagle,
Yes.
Mr. Clark. Yes. Ms. Clark,
No.
Ms. Rudd,
No.
Mr. Chairman, you have 4 ayes, 3 noes.
Okay, then the motion carries. Okay, then we move on to the second, and I would entertain a motion. Yes, I'm sorry, this is on Scholastic's appeal. Mr. Cagle.
I move that we deny their request.
Okay, so the motion has been made to deny the request of the appeal. Do I have a second? Mr. Clark seconds that motion. Discussion. Ms. Clark.
I sense that there was some confusion about the review process, the original process, the information that they got on which to revise their materials and respond, and the re-review process and what they came before us to share. There's a lot of information that we were given, and I think it's a difficult situation with so many reviewers having found so many reviewers did review and found issues with the materials, and then there was a lot of information given to us today. So it's a complicated
And it is.
situation.
I agree. And again, focusing again on our process of what we are to do the best that we can. It's really hard I understand, it's hard to get our grasp around this in the short period of time that we have in order to do that. Mr. Cagle?
Dr. Coons, do you recall offhand how many reviewers failed this material?
In the review process, we had 35 reviewers review K1, 2, 3, and 4. In the re-review process, we had another 10 reviewers and potentially additional tiebreakers review these materials. So at least 35 expert reviewers from the state of Tennessee, ELA experts, reviewed these materials and failed them.
Okay.
And if you look at your document on the re-review, 50% of the instructional shifts failed and 30% of the standards failed.
Any further discussion?
Call the question.
Roll call vote, please. Okay, I'm sorry. We'll make this clear one more time. The motion, we'll read the motion again.
The motion is to deny the request of the appeal for Scholastic.
Okay, roll call vote.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Ms. Bowman?
Yes.
Dr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Cagle?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
No.
Ms. Rudd?
Yes.
You have 6 ayes, Chairman, 1 no.
Okay, the motion carries. All right, so we're going to take we don't need to take a break. Okay, so there's no need to take the break to amend the recommendation for approval. And the recommendation for approval of that list would be behind tab 4. Okay, you've had an opportunity to look through those. And I will call for a motion. Ms. Bowman,
I move that we adopt Section E of the adoption list.
second? Mr.
I
Cagle?
second.
Second by Mr. Cagle. So, any discussion? In the discussion, I would like to go right back to where we started from. I think that the importance here is that the materials they're bountiful. There are a lot of materials out there. We have followed the process with the legislative intent as best that we know how. The waiver process is there for the districts who would choose to do so, and we move forward with the intent of what's best for students in Tennessee. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing.
You voted to recommend to approve, and then you need to vote on first and final read on the actual list.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the first thing that we're doing, we're voting on is a recommendation to approve the list, and we'll take a roll call vote on that, and then we'll actually vote on the actual list again. So, roll call?
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Ms. Bowman?
Yes.
Dr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Cagle?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Rudd?
Yes.
Chairman, you have 7 ayes.
Okay, so the motion passes, and now we move to approve, or take a motion on Cycle E ELA adoption list, first and final read, and that is the list that's behind tab 4. Entertain a motion. Ms. Bowman makes motion, second. Mr. Cagle, discussion. We will move on the vote. Roll call vote to approve Cycle E ELA adoption list for final read.
Mr. Durbin?
Yes.
Ms. Bowman?
Yes.
Dr. Coons?
Yes.
Mr. Cagle?
Yes.
Mr. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Ms. Rudd?
Yes.
7 ayes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, announcements and notices. Dr. Kuhn.
So typically, the Tennessee Textbook Commission meets in the spring to move forward with the next material, which would be Cycle F, our math adoption. However, you voted and the state board voted to delay the math adoption to do a math standards review. We are in the process of the standards adoption. This process will begin in the fall for mathematics. The state board manages the process to revise the math standards, and then they go to standards recommendation committee in the summer. And so we will have new math standards next year. This committee decided that they will wait to adopt textbooks because that makes sense with new math standards for our districts. So we will begin the math textbook adoption next fall. So we will have a meeting not in the spring of 2020 because it doesn't make sense to have a meeting if we're not in the middle of an adoption process. So look for meeting dates to be sent and reviewed for late August, early September to begin the math textbook adoption process.
And we certainly hope that all of you will be here to help us in that process.
And our 2 vacancies.
And our 2 vacancies, and Toto too. Any other business from the commission? If not, I have none. Yes, Ms. Bowman.
One request, when we schedule for the fall, can we not make it on Fridays, please?
Okay. Any other?
Pam, can you make sure that goes in the minutes, please?
There's a request to have it on Friday in the fall. I was going to say, not to have it on Friday in the fall. Woo, good. Okay. Okay. All right. If there are no more comments, I will take a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.